Another beautiful day. Another beautiful day. Another beautiful day. Um, I love that this Wednesday show is like the thing I'm committed to. I try to bring a perspective. I try to bring insights, things I'm seeing in culture. We were supposed to have a live guest today, Chloe Macintosh, the founder of Comma. We're going to push that back to next week. So you're just stuck with me. And I hope you're okay with that. Wednesdays is a chance for me to reflect, to things I'm seeing in space, ideas I have about business, culture, the future. I'm just really appreciative that you take the time to tune in. For those of you on Instagram, head over to twitch.tv/keyinfluencer. I don't always broadcast on Instagram. I decided to do that today. Usually we have guests that come in. Thing is, I never really have an idea of what we're going to talk about on Wednesdays. So, I have ideas, don't get me wrong, but I never really plan, which probably drives my team crazy. But yeah, I tend to give you fresh off the top of the dome kind of thoughts. So nothing's filtered. It's all, nothing's scripted. This is kind of live and direct. Welcome to Culture & Co. Weekly. If you are brand new to this experience, welcome. Thank you for tuning in. I want to talk about more really about building dynamic communities and why I think building communities on the internet are important. I think as what I've observed is that in the way that we're thinking about our community is there's, for many of you who are watching, there's sort of the outside layer of interest. And so the way that we've constructed the community is that when I do these shows, when I'm on Clubhouse doing content, that's sort of an outer layer of our community. And so what I've been thinking a lot about is in every business, what's your software and then what's your hardware, right? So if you look at the business model of like a Soho house, right? Their software is the membership community. It's the expensive matcha tea that you get. It's the programs they do, and then on the back end is their hardware, and that's sort of their infrastructure. That's where they derive a lot of revenue. And for Soho House, for them, it ends up being real estate holdings, right? So their software is, the F&B business that they do, the membership, and then the hardware are the real estate holdings. And I've been thinking a lot about that. Shout out to Joey Rubin, who gave me that whole analogy of software and hardware. I've been thinking about that in every business and every community. What's the stack? What's the stack that you're on? What's the, what are you building on top of? And what's the front end and the back end of your business look like? Not so much from a perspective of just technology, but is there a front end to your business? Is there a software analogy? And then is there a back end part of your business that maybe drives revenue? Is there a back end part of your business that could spin off into other IP? I like to think about sometimes the other analogy I'll use, sometimes like a Marvel universe. So in our business today, the front end of it is content and experiences. We're talking to distributors about some of the content we do. For those of you that are new, we do a show called The Originals in Clubhouse where we sit down with like an OG, like a legendary executive or celebrity or notable person, and we spend 3 hours with them unpacking. We have a show called The Other America that we're doing on Thursdays now, where we dive into social justice, matters of race and so forth. I do that with Shira Lazar. We are doing a show on sexual wellness. We're supporting a woman named Chloe Macintosh, who's going to be on today, talking about sexual wellness. So all of these things are like parts of my ecosystem. So the question becomes, what are you building? What's your stack? What are you building your ideas on? Where are there opportunities to spin off into other ideas? And then where's the role of technology in that? How do you use technology to provide efficiencies? I have this saying that I say all the time: just because you can doesn't mean you should. Just because you can jump on, LinkedIn or YouTube Live or wherever you're watching me right now, Twitter, wherever, doesn't mean you could. and so, I think about that a lot. Like, we're going to move into a period where, and we're here now, where people are home, people are quarantined, people are, working from home, living from home, playing from home, being educated from home. If you're building a community, if you're someone out there that's watching me now and you're building a tribe and you're building a community, what is it that you're providing? There's a woman named Priya Parker who wrote a book called The Art of Gathering. And she talks a lot about like the purpose behind meetings. Like, why are you having a meeting? And stating that why up front, whenever you're having a gathering, whenever you're having a meeting. And I like to think about that in terms of the internet. Like, if you're deciding to do some sort of thing, it's really important that you state your why, you state your reason for actually putting out content. Just because there's just a lot out there. So that's what we, for instance, that's what we do here. The idea here is I'm giving you sort of conversations I'm having with founders or investors and distilling it in a weekly show. And that's what Culture and Code does weekly, is bring you this idea of, this is what I've, learned from, Friday, last Wednesdays, to now. What is it that you're doing? What is it that you're providing your community? And think about that. And you have a lot to provide. Each of us, have a unique perspective. You are special. You are unique in what you see and what you, how you interpret the world. That's why I love diversity. One of the things that I pride myself on in this community that I'm building is diversity, and not just what you normally hear in terms of the word diversity. Yes, we are ethnically diverse. I am personally ethnically diverse. So damn well that I'm going to have a diverse community, but also, regions of the world. So, in the course of a week, my conversations run from Qatar, Dubai, Brazil, to Oakland, Detroit, Philadelphia. Diverse in terms of like industries. I've worked in music, fashion, advertising, digital tech, venture capital. And then even when I owned an advertising agency, my clients were Equinox, Nike, who else? I worked on FedEx, ConAgra, New Rubbermaid. I've worked in so many industries, Florida Power and Light. And I try to, I've always tried to maintain just this, this curiosity. I mean, I think that when I've been a consultant advisor agency guy for a long time, and I come into each engagement just really curious. And so because of that, we have a really diverse set of industries that we cover. And then age, I would say age is the other diversity. I have 20-year-old sophomore at USC, and I have a 70-year-old entertainment lawyer, and so try to put all that into a really diverse set of inputs that I'm getting. I think that's probably, as I think about the internet and I think about, unfortunately, what the internet is driven by these silos. And so you end up like living in these these conversations that are just the same, whether, politically, you're just talking to people that believe in what you believe in, work in the world you work in, and I just believe, and it's been, kind of a hallmark from my career, is that, diversity in thought and diversity in experiences and diversity in backgrounds just makes for a better table, a better kitchen table. So yeah, that's one of the things. That's one of the hallmarks that we build the Authenticated on. So yeah, so it's been good. But let me get some cities. I one of the things I also love to do on this weekly show is get a sense of who's watching and what cities you're in. I am, definitely driven by a network that comes from a lot of different places. So if you're out there, just would love to know what cities you're watching from. I'm broadcasting on so many different channels, so I think it's always fun to kind of see and see where people are tuning in from. Pakistan on the check-in. Pakistan is a place that I've actually never been to, but I was headed to Pakistan. I actually had a speaking gig in Pakistan, and I never made it. Unfortunately, the folks who were bringing me out turned me around. I ended up spending another week in Dubai, and I find it unfortunate that I never made it to Pakistan. I did a lot of research on Pakistan, and there's an energy that comes out of Pakistan that I really feel like I want to tap into, because I know a lot of folks from the area, and I find like definitely a brotherhood and sisterhood in my folks that live there, and was really looking forward to coming out. And of course, I love Atlanta. I see Atlanta on the check-in. Atlanta is a very, very special city for me. I spent 15 years living in Atlanta. I often say that Atlanta is a place where the difficult conversations can happen, and do happen. And I really, really appreciate my time in Atlanta. And I think as we look at the country and we look at where what I'm calling it migration patterns, because of course this pandemic has caused a lot of people to move. So that's one of the things that I've recognized, is that the cost of living on the West Coast is expensive. People are leaving New York City. People want a better life, and I truly, truly, truly believe that Atlanta is going to be the recipient of an influx of great people. We are seeing. I mean, the city that I'm hearing most about is Austin, Texas. A lot of people are moving to Austin, Texas. I'm friends with an NFL legend here in LA, and I was really shocked because he just bought a house in Beverly Hills, and he just hit me. I'm going to go have lunch with him tomorrow, and he's like, "We're moving to Austin, Texas," and I think it's really interesting that that Austin is, this place that people are considering moving to. Not because I think Austin's bad, but I just thought there were some other cities that people would be thinking about moving to. But it makes sense. Austin, Texas has a beautiful lifestyle, great restaurants. It seems like a pretty thriving economy. And as Dana Hernandez says, Austin is the new LA. Dana, I think you're from Austin. Thank you for tuning in. I know you tune in every week. Um, you know, Santa Monica, thank you. Thank you. Shout out to Santa Monica. I am Santa Monica adjacent. Just left the beach, as a matter of fact. I chose to move to Los Angeles because 4 years ago I wanted to learn more about sort of leveraging my access to entertainment and celebrities and athletes and finance, and I moved here 4 years ago to build, what I'm building now. Initially with a partner, a guy named Troy Carter, and we parted ways, and I just continued with the business model. And LA felt like the right place to come back to. I went to UCLA. I'm from the Bay Area, and I just love what's happening in Los Angeles. Yes, it is a very expensive city to live in, but there is. What I love about LA is there is this diversity, and it's no longer just a one industry town. LA used to just be known for kind of entertainment and media, obviously, but the tech scene is thriving here. The what I would like to see more from LA, let me say it that way, is it sits on such an incredible diverse foundation. Latinos, Asians. I put Black folks in there. We are a very small percentage out here, becoming even smaller, I think, in Los Angeles. That took some getting used to in Los Angeles. Coming from Atlanta, where there are a large number of African Americans. LA is to me, in my opinion, and having lived here in the past and looking at the data, it appears to me that African Americans have really are leaving LA and have left LA. I'll just and I'm speaking in broad, sweeping generalizations, and even just California in general. I'm a native Californian. It's been interesting coming back here. I think the other thing I'd like to see more of is an embracing of tough conversations about race. I think LA and the West Coast gets this sort of pass because it appears to be liberal, it appears to be open-minded, and while it is that, it is an incredibly open-minded culture. It's one that doesn't embrace tough conversations. It's one that doesn't dive into really, really difficult conversations that are matters of race, economics, culture, and coming from Atlanta, which I'm not saying is a perfect utopia at all. There was this willingness to talk about really, really difficult things. And so what I want for, what I desire for, what I really want for California, and in particular Los Angeles, is to embrace conversations about identity, about racial identity, about what it means to be what it means to be Asian, what it means to be Black, what it means to be Latino. And it's not like those conversations don't happen individually, but they don't happen together. I always used to say about Atlanta, the one thing I didn't love about Atlanta is I barely had, I grew up in the West Coast. So, I grew up speaking Spanish. I grew up knowing the difference between, Korean food and Thai food. When you move out of California, it used to shock me. I was like, you don't know Filipinos? That's not something for you. I grew up in the Bay Area where I knew that. And I grew up understanding and having respect for my brown brothers, my I grew up, in San Jose, at a time when blacks and Latinos were fighting, and then, became a brotherhood. I grew up as a Raider fan where sports brought us together, as Oakland Raider fans. What I think is, one of the greatest sports franchises, that because being a Raider fan is like being in a gang, and a gang of all colors, just to bring a little sports and football into it. So I grew up really with an interesting context of race and togetherness. When you move to New York, people are like, oh, the diversity. But even in New York is nothing like the Bay Area's 70s and 80s, where we grew up really together. And moving back to LA, I see the promise and the opportunity for us to unite. But LA lives in these silos, right? And people just generally live behind gates and live in their own communities. And the utopian LA that I would like to see is just a lot more togetherness. It still feels very separatist. So yeah, that's my spin on LA. Wanted to go a little deep on that because I am sitting in Los Angeles, and I think a lot about cities. A lot of my work over the last, I would say, 5 to 8 years has been about cities. And I spent 15 years in Atlanta, basically. And I would say for the last 5 years of my time in Atlanta, it was spent, talking about the brand Atlanta, encouraging founders or investors to invest in Atlanta. And so I think a lot about cities because I spent a lot of time in a city that I did not grow up in, that I am not a Southerner. And I spent a lot of time encouraging people to consider consider Atlanta. And so it gave me an opportunity to really think about why I loved Atlanta and why I love the South. And as I began to zoom in and then zoom out, when I was an Atlantan, it gave me a perspective on cities. And I feel like cities and the way they brand themselves are archaic. It used to bother me, like the story that Atlanta used to tell. And I was like, you're telling an old story. Like there's such an updated version. And the problem with like cities, and the way that they market themselves is they're generally marketed through like the tourism, the folks in tourism or the folks in the mayor's office. And they're just, no disrespect, they're just old. And people are old. The way they tell stories is tired. And I just felt like when I lived in Atlanta, there was like an updated way to tell the Atlanta story. And I think you're seeing that now. I don't live in Atlanta now, but, I think the perception of Atlanta has been changed by storytelling and narrative. It actually proves the power of media, entertainment, on the way you perceive a city, right? Like you perceive Austin, Texas, maybe because you've been to South by Southwest or you've seen Austin City Lights. You perceive, New Orleans because of jazz music, right? You perceive Compton, whether you're right or wrong. Your perception of Compton, is because, maybe you grew up as a 90s hip hop fan and you saw what NWA was talking about in Compton. It was crazy. You go to Compton and Compton is like thriving and, it's an incredible city with an incredible mayor. But, again, cities end up, taking on this personality. And so Atlanta, for me, when I lived there, I felt people only knew it by like the Olympics and Coca-Cola and Dr. King and, Jimmy Carter or, all those things. But people didn't realize that, Atlanta has a sick graffiti scene and street art scene. People didn't realize that Atlanta had a beautiful food, seed to table food scene, right? People in Atlanta didn't recognize that Black females drive entrepreneurship in Atlanta. Um, and so like I feel like what happens is we allow perspectives and storytellers, and that's why storytelling is so important. That's why understanding your narrative and understanding for a city, understanding your narrative is really important. And that's why I worked in the music industry, I worked in entertainment, I worked in media, and I really feel privileged that I respect the value of the story, of the narrative. And so the work that I was doing when I was in Atlanta, that I continue to do in cities, is how do we tell another story? How do we frame a narrative that is reflective of everybody, right? Of everything that's in the city. I grew up in Palo Alto. I went to high school in Silicon Valley. And so I always found that, like, when I grew up in Palo Alto in the 80s, it's not like anybody really knew Palo Alto outside of Stanford. I mean, it's a big deal, don't get me wrong. But your perception of Palo Alto, if you didn't know it in the 80s, was, oh, it's this beautiful little town that sits outside of the San Francisco Bay Area, that's 45 minutes south of San Francisco. And now, because of Silicon Valley, which we didn't even call it Silicon Valley back then, you think of Palo Alto, as the center or the Vatican City of this emerging industrial revolution that we call, the technology age, right? And it is that. I mean, it's not that. But the streets aren't paved with gold, and there's not honey just falling from the rocks. That was a crazy analogy. But the perception of Palo Alto, there is a brand recognition of Palo Alto that's global. I went to Palo Alto High School. People were like, "Oh, you went to Palo Alto High School? Wow!" And it was amazing, and it was incredible. And I literally saw the birth of the internet, like the early internet, on Stanford's campus. I used to sneak into the library, Meyer and Green Library, and I used to play with computers that talked to other computers, and it was the early internet. When I moved to Atlanta, they used to say, "Oh, we're the Palo Alto of the South," and I was like, "The Palo Alto of the South? Why don't you just be Atlanta? Why do you have to be the Uber or the anything of anything? Just be the Atlanta of the Atlanta." And but it just goes to show you that there is this thing that happens in cities, right? There's this narrative building process that happens around cities, and it draws you in. It draws you into. That's why you want to move there. That's why you want to be there. And when you're inside of us, and the reason that I built a tour called Culture and Code, and we would take investors and founders and creatives and my friends, and we would go into these great American cities. And part of it was because I had the wrong perception of cities. So, for instance, I hated Detroit. I had been to Detroit a couple times. I didn't love it. I had this perspective of this dark, dingy, nasty city. And so what did I do? Is I chose Detroit as one of the cities that I would go to. The Culture and Code tour was a 72-hour exploration of great cities. And so I basically would spend 3 days. I would bring founders and funders, and we'd do a dinner the first night. If you want to know anything about a city, gather women. So I would gather 25 women, around a breakfast series that we did. Then we would go to the hood. And if you want to know anything about a city, go into communities that you probably don't know or probably wouldn't go into. And we would do that. And then we would wrap it all up with like a kind of a Ask Me Anything session. All these people would fly in for it. You'd be able to ask, if you were a Detroit person, you'd be able to ask a venture capitalist or someone from a big brand. Anyway, so we did that, and we did Detroit. And man, I hated Detroit. I mean, I was like, I never thought ever I would be there. And we did Detroit Culture and Code, and I just fell in love. I fell in love with the energy of Detroit. I fell in love with the immigrant hustle narrative in Detroit. So again, it was just like my narrative was wrong, my perspective was wrong, and I had a lot of good friends from Detroit. What up, though? I love them. They were great. Dream Hampton and Nicole Patrice and a lot of incredible Detroiters. Um, but I just didn't understand why they were so ecstatic and passionate about Detroit. I'd been there a couple times. I was unimpressed. And so we did Culture and Code Detroit. And man, let me tell you, I fell in love with the city. I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the communities. So we did night number one. We did sort of a dinner with about 60 people. Dan Gilbert, who has put $5 billion into Detroit, his team was there. NBA players were there. Derek Coleman, who played in the NBA. It was really amazing. I'll post the video on Twitter. But yeah, Detroit was an eye opener, and I've gone back since then, and really find Detroit to be one of the most inspiring cities. And I had a complete wrong perception of Detroit. And so I think a lot about cities. I think a lot about their brand and how they tell their story. I think a lot about the people who live in those cities and who may not live in LA or New York or one of these flashy, shiny cities, but does not mean that they don't have like sick creativity. To be honest with you, I live in LA. The most creative people I know that I've met in the last decade are in the South. I mean, I'll just be honest with you. Like, I think LA is cool and there are creatives here, don't get me wrong. But like, when I'm like looking for creative inspiration, I can't say that my people are in like the cities you think they are. Like the most inspiring people I have are in cities that are not the main cities. They're in, Stockholm, not in London, right? They're in Manchester, maybe not London, right? So I tend to think that, these major cities are wonderful, but the real root and the real creativity comes from people I know who are in other cities. I think that LA is great for broadcasting and buying media and building empires here, but the raw talent. Oh, it's a beautiful butterfly. Man, the butterflies have been beautiful lately. It's crazy. I also find that like little things in life, right? Like I really have grown to appreciate, I think, being home and being sequestered in my house. One, I appreciate my house, but like now I actually stop and actually will look at a butterfly or look at a flower for a prolonged period of time, and life before was just moving really fast and, really, really busy. And I really appreciate that this moment has caused me to just sometimes just to stop in my tracks and look at the flowers that are growing in my backyard, or look at, look at things, look at my family, look at my kids, and just stop and just like pause, and just reflect. I also have a really great meditation practice going for some of you who are meditators. I am loving Sam Harris. If you guys are familiar with Sam Harris, he has an app called Waking Up. I think he wrote a book called Waking Up, and highly recommend the work of Sam Harris. Incredible. I see my friend Brevin Knight is texting me. I don't know why. Shout out to Brevin Knight in Memphis. Brevin Knight played in the NBA for a long time. Went to Stanford and played in the NBA. Also had a really cool conversation yesterday with Ryan Leslie. That was really cool. Ryan Leslie is someone I've known for a while. Always respected Ryan Leslie. He is a music producer, artist. He was in Puffy's camp. He did Cassie, but most people don't know that Ryan Leslie is also just like a technologist, really appreciates technology. And he built a thing called the superphone. And it was sort of the first of its kind of like smart inbox, smart messaging, smart text messaging. So Ryan and I hadn't talked in a while, and I really appreciate that guy. He's been a futurist in the music space for a long time. And super excited. I'm going to see my friend Tony Gonzalez tomorrow, the legendary Hall of Fame tight end, who's probably taught me more about mindfulness and meditation than anybody I know. Random friends I have. One is another one, Princess Martha Louise of Norway. Between Princess Martha Louise and Tony Gonzalez, who I put them together at one point. We had a quick meeting one time. Those two people really set me on a course of mindfulness and meditation and practices. Tony Gonzalez played in the NFL for a really long time, and talked to me a lot about how he used visualization practices and a lot of mindfulness techniques to become one of the greatest tight ends that ever played in the NFL. And so he's like one of my brain science nerds. He's got all kinds of things at his crib, like these things that like measure his brain. And I don't know, man. Whenever I go to his house, he has a podcast show. You guys should check it out. I think he's still doing it. I don't know. So back to cities. And Dana Hernandez asked a really interesting question, which is, do you think cost of living pushes artists and creatives to the outskirts? 1,000%. Cost of living and housing in general, affordable housing is important. I actually did a show, I should re-air it, on Is New York City Over? That was the title. And we did it with Michaela Martigani, who is the executive director of More Art in New York City. They're an organization dedicated to they're an organization dedicated to public art, and so we had a conversation about, is New York City over? And New York City obviously has been a hub for creativity. It's been a hub for the media, entertainment, business world. And I've been having this conversation with a lot of New Yorkers. The cost of living, or the rents are going down in New York City. There is a feeling that New York City will thrive and have even a better resurgence on the other side of this. Interesting conversations I've been having about New York City and its creative class. But to answer your question, do you think cost of living pushes artists and creatives to the outskirts? Absolutely. I also think this. I think the internet is a great equalizer. And I think the internet gives us the ability to, as an artist, as a creative, to understand the music that's coming out of Joburg, right? To understand the fashion that's coming out of Berlin, to understand the nomenclature and the slang that comes out of Atlanta, right? And so I think that the internet is a great equalizer for creatives and creativity. And I think that, so it's twofold. It's one that, yes, it's very expensive to live in cities. And then the other is that the internet is a great equalizer. So to that end, one of the questions that we've been asking in our network is, is being a citizen of a city also include your online citizenship? So like if you're so the Authenticated and what I'm building is like its own community and city. And so, the questions, the provocations that we've been asking in our network is about citizenship. And what does it mean to live in a city? And does that passport now include virtual cities? And December, let me get the dates right. 3rd, 4th, 5th, or 6th, 7th, 8th. I don't remember. I'll tell you later. I'm involved in a conference called the New City and it's with an organization called 2020 Visions. And we have 3 days lined up on this idea of the new city. Um, and I'm really, really excited to dig in with some really big brains, from architecture to community organizations to a mayor and even a presidential candidate, former presidential candidate. I can't give you any spoilers, but we're going to be unpacking this idea of the new city and what does it mean to be a citizen of a city, both physical cities and virtual cities. So stay tuned. We're going to be doing a bunch of events leading up to that. But yeah, I think that cost of living is a factor. I think it's also this idea of, what does it mean? Do you need to live in a big city? Like, I was on a call yesterday with a friend of mine in Cambridge, in UK, Cambridge, UK, and he is living in Cambridge, was living in LA, spent, and he was just like, wow, I have a great way of life here. I have a place for my kid to run around in, and I don't feel like I can live in LA. His wife is African. She's a Sierra Leonean or Ghanaian Brit, and she doesn't feel safe living in LA. And it was like I couldn't even I wanted to jump in and be like, no, you can live in LA, but I can't even tell you right now. I couldn't even argue with that, right? And I don't even know if you necessarily need to live in LA right now. That's what I'm living in LA. I'm not going anywhere, right? But I feel like you can do what you're doing from anywhere. The internet is the great equalizer. It's also your distributor. It's also where you can find your investor. And because we're going to be in a really lockdown state for a while, life is not going to get back to normal. I hope you guys know that. It's going to be a while. Meaning that you used to go to South by Southwest and you'd meet people, or you used to go to, there used to be concerts. There used to be these moments and these things that would gather people. So now it's about hunkering down local where you are, right in your community. And I think it's using your time on the internet wisely, right? It's making sure you're connected to the right communities. It's spending your time with people that are diverse, kind of what we talked about earlier in this show. It's cultivating and bonsai tree cutting, your network, because your network is your net worth. And that's what we're doing at The Authenticated. I feel so fortunate that I have about 300 people, that I've sort of brought together in this network. We have an app, we have a secret society WhatsApp group. And I don't feel like and I'm someone who was on planes, trains, automobiles a lot. I was definitely moving around the world. And, for the foreseeable future, I'm quite comfortable in hunkering down and, connecting through my network. So yeah, I also feel like I'm not even returning all the calls I need to return. And I feel like I'm, I did a list the other day of all the meetings I took in September. And I have 50 people that I literally, and if you're watching, I apologize, 50 people that I met in September that I can't even keep up with. And so I'm going deep into my network, deeper, and I'm going deeper into my city, into my block, into my community. And I think that's what is happening for a lot of us, is just going deeper into what you have and going deeper into the city that you currently are in. And so, but I'm I'm not gonna I can't wait to get to Pittsburgh. I can't wait to get to Cleveland. I can't wait to get to because I really want to see the growth of these cities. I want to see what comes out of this thing in the next 18 months and 24 months. And, like I'm so bullish on these cities that are not New York, not LA, not, Palo Alto. Like, I'm just excited about what is going to happen to cities because we're here. We're building new models of food distribution, of delivery, of we're building. Hopefully, we're building nonprofits and social impact and social justice organizations that are local, that are doing local work. And so, as someone who thought a lot about cities and local innovation, which is like my jam. I'm excited about what you're going to do in your city, what you are going to do in the city you're in. I'm excited to hear from you on what you're doing. And I just want to be connected to you. They're like my little nodes. Like I never feel disconnected from Detroit or from Sao Paulo or from, Joburg or Dubai, because I'm always connected to people. I definitely feel connected to Atlanta. Because I have family there. My mom moved there. My in-laws are there, So, creatives. I was just discussing this with my wife. Um, creatives draw experience from cities, but draw peace and inspiration from nature and space. Yeah, that is a really, really good way to say. And I feel really fortunate. I live on the beach. I just started my morning on the water, and then I can use the rest of LA. I kind of treat LA like Manhattan. I treat it like boroughs. I have a Bronx, Queens, Staten Island approach to LA. So you may catch me on the east side, on the west side, South Bay, and most people in LA, it's strange. They don't really move around like that. They just like stay in their cluster. But for me, like, what I'm saying, like if I want like a proper, like, proper mole, there is no mole in where I live. You know what I'm saying? Like I need mole. I need pho. I need lumpia. I need some vegan food. So like I love LA because it has all those things, like what I just told you. If you don't know what mole is, it's really important. Get some mole in your life. If you don't know what lumpia is, it's a proper Filipino egg roll. If you don't know what these things are, and for me, LA becomes like a cultural, exploratory treasure chest and opportunities. So anyway, I hope you enjoy what I bring every week to this show. Next week we'll have a guest. If you're on Clubhouse, we're doing tons of stuff on Clubhouse. I don't even know. My favorite vegan spot, someone asked me in LA, Cafe Gratitude. Definitely Cafe Gratitude. Love Cafe Gratitude. Haven't been there since the quarantine, but I love Cafe Gratitude, and they do a great job, great branding. If you don't know what these things are, you might not be from LA. Yeah. I mean, I try to keep this thing global. I try to keep this conversation, on all of your cities. That's why I ask you to drop in, what cities you're from. I have a connection, I feel like, to so many great cities. This conversation has been from getting out of my head into the screen. What I love about the internet is it never forgets. So all of these episodes I've done are all living on the internet. You can go check them out. My content team, we have an entire roadmap. We're going to be bringing to you Culture and Code next week. We have, no spoilers. There's going to be so much good stuff. So I hope you've enjoyed like 3 months of just me bringing to you kind of thoughts and ideas Culture and Code, with the tour I mentioned where we went around the cities, we now do that in the virtual streaming space. So we bring city conversations to you. We bring ideas to you. We bring people to you, companies to you that you should know about through Culture and Code. So we'd love to see you. Stay connected to me. If you can't find me or find that you're not working hard enough. And just have an amazing day. Live in complete gratitude. I promise you it changes the whole game. If you can find moments to stop complaining about life and to actually just start appreciating it, and I'm talking to myself right now, I'm not even preaching to you, it'll change the entire course of the day. If you can find, if you can feel and have tea with your emotions, even if you just stop and just kind of think about, like, the feelings that you're feeling and label them, give them titles: angry, upset, nervous, feel like an imposter. If you can kind of do that throughout the course of a day, I promise you it'll change the energy for you. It'll change so much in how you interpret a situation, interpret a tough conversation with your kid or with your coworker, or with your investor. Just try to like pause for a minute and try to do that in the course of a day. If you're new to meditation, get Headspace. It's great, nice, simple, beginner, easy. If you can only do 5 minutes of meditation, it's great. I really love and highly recommend, because I'm just obsessed with his work this week, the work of Sam Harris, and the Waking Up app. I love Tara Brach for some of you more advanced meditators out there. And I love Dr. Joe Dispenza, who does incredible work. Dr. Joe Dispenza has a lot of meditations about quantum, like sort of quantum ideas, let's call them. So yeah, that's my little meditation. I am not a meditation teacher. I am just like you, a regular dude who meditates because I don't know what I would do if it wasn't for meditation and mindfulness. And I was not the person who was even into all this meditation, mindfulness. Like, it's shocking, even to me sometimes. I'm like, this is crazy. I'm talking about meditation. Yeah, I've also been having crazy conversations with a lot of people about the power of plant medicine and psychedelics, and the psilocybin, and it's been really fascinating. I think plant medicine and all that stuff doesn't really get talked about enough. And I'm reading James, what's his name, Michael Pollan's book right now about the power of psychedelics. And I, again, like Detroit, like cities, I had a totally different perspective around psychedelics and plant medicine. And a lot of this has been around for hundreds of years. And what happens is we've stripped away the indigenous connection to a lot of stuff. And a lot of us Black and brown folks, unfortunately, don't get the opportunity because we have these cultural stigmas against some of these things. And so yeah, I've been in Michael Pollan's book, kind of deep in research about that as well. So that's what I'm thinking about this week. What are you thinking about? Have a great week. It's great talking to you. Talk soon.